Okay.
Wait.
The voice.
Mm-hmm. Just looking for
And
Facebook.
now we are on Facebook. So here we are. Okay, folks, welcome to History Matters and So Does Coffee. And I'm not going to hold the mug up because it's so big that I can't cover it over. So just trust me that there's a mug. Today we're going to talk about, I think the title I came up with yesterday was, the court jesters, the people standing outside the courtroom as Donald Trump's trial continues, and really more than anything else, what that means, what that is saying, and what that sort of says about the moment that we're in now. But before I do that, I turn to my partner in crime, Annie, who will explain the rules of the game.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Annie Evans from New American History, and we're excited for today's talk. Those of you who are joining us through Zoom, the chat's already lit up. We've got over 40 some messages already. We haven't even started. Joanne is going to talk about today's topic for about 30 minutes. While she's doing that, if you will put questions related to that topic in the Q&A, I'll be back in about 30 minutes and we'll get going. So I'll see you in a little bit.
Wonderful. And I'm supposed to remind Sam the avocado that whatever you need to do afterwards so that people can see me and Annie at the same time. I think I don't, at any rate, I think I'm supposed to remind you of that. So I'm doing my duty. Okay. Yes, I see thumbs floating. Okay. Excellent. I have done my job. Okay. So I want to talk about what we've been seeing outside the courthouse in New York as Donald Trump's trial continues concerning Stormy Daniels and all associated matters. I wanted to talk because it's been, for initially it was sort of proceeding in a typical court-ish kind of way, and now we've had a growing parade of people, of Republican members of Congress coming and standing outside the courthouse and speaking about the trial in ways that are interesting. And I'm actually going to focus less on individual people and less on specifically what they're saying, although I will talk about generally what they're saying, and more on the implications of it, because that is what grabs my attention. That is what I think we need to be talking about, because in the moment that we're in, things that are going on that are abnormal and systemic at the same time in their implications, I think are important to note and to point out what's happening so that we don't take for granted the fact that this is happening, or don't assume that this is politics as normal, because very little about what we're experiencing these days one could categorize as politics as normal. So that's what I want to talk about today, is what this means. Now, we've been seeing shifting groups, different people appearing outside the courthouse in New York, coming in clusters. Sometimes one day when they were like dressed alike as though they were a band of some kind or something, sort of dressed kind of like Trump with the red tie, which was strange. At one point, I believe on one day, so many of them appearing in front of the courthouse that there was business on the floor of the house that they could not do because of the number of people who were at the courthouse, or number of key people who were at the courthouse. So they had to postpone at least one item of business because of the performances that are happening outside of the courthouse. And of course, what they've been doing is in some ways echoing, repeating, or adding to the sorts of things that Donald Trump is not supposed to be saying right now because of his gag order. He's been told he's not supposed to attack the jury. He's not supposed to be attacking witnesses. He's not supposed to be attacking the judge's family. These would seem to be kind of simple things, and like normal things to be able to do, right? Things that during any trial, but particularly the trial of a former president, you don't say things that might endanger witnesses, jurors, family members, right? This is not like above and beyond the Call of Duty shocking demands. So that's what the gag order that surrounds Trump is mostly about. But he is, generally speaking, not responsible for what his surrogates are saying outside the courthouse, as long as it can't be proven that he is explicitly like scripting things and asking them to say it. Then we at least move into murky territory. The gag order, I want to get the language here. There's an expanded gag order that says that former President Trump cannot, quote, he's banned from making or directing others to make public statements about witnesses, jurors, or the family or of courtroom participants. They can say whatever they want, said a former federal prosecutor. They're not bound by a gag order, but Trump is not supposed to be making or directing others to make these kinds of comments. And so what we are watching is, he himself, Donald Trump, has called them surrogates, standing outside the courthouse, saying the sorts of things that he's not supposed to be saying. Of course, he's not supposed to be saying them. And ideally, no one is supposed to be saying them because it endangers people, right? It puts people in danger. If the point of saying them is, hey, look, this is partisan, you could say that without specifically talking about the corruption of a judge's daughter or whatever else it is that you want to talk about, right? If you want to make that point, and I'm going to come back to that point shortly because that's a problematic point in and of itself, but there are ways to say the sorts of things they want to say without being so bluntly threatening towards individuals who are taking place in this court case. Because of course, that's the point, right? Trial by jury. You're tried by a jury of your peers. They should feel safe and capable of listening to the evidence from both sides, hearing the arguments, coming to a decision as a group, and then having that decision be announced. They should not have to worry about their safety. They should not have to worry about the safety of their families. The same holds true for the family of a judge presiding over a trial. The same holds true, witness tampering, right? The same holds true for threatening in some way or another witnesses. These are all things that are not bound up in our current moment. These are basics, right? Basics of just a fair sort of rule of law, a system grounded on the rule of law, in which trials should be allowed to happen, and the safety of all concerned should be top priority so that people can be honest, they can speak their mind, they can say what they want to, and we can have the evidence out on the table, and we can have a discussion, and we can have a trial, and we can come to a conclusion that feels grounded on evidence and fair. Things don't always work ideally in that way, but that's the goal, right? So what we're seeing, the kind of behavior that we're seeing, is certainly not only is it not doing anything to help Donald Trump have a fair trial, it is essentially denying that we should be having a trial at all. And on many, many levels that I'm going to be talking about in a moment here, that's highly problematic. But okay, some of the things that are happening, there's a list of things going on with this group of surrogates standing and denouncing people outside the courthouse and defending Donald Trump in the process. Some of the things that I think it reveals or that they're doing are very obvious, but I'll start out with the obvious. Obviously, some are in one way or another auditioning for vice president, throwing their names in the ring, right? In one way or another, they're auditioning for favor and maybe even office with Donald Trump by standing outside that courthouse. So it's like, the basic pandering to Donald Trump for favor of some kind. Maybe the vice presidency, maybe favor in some other way, but that's part of what we're seeing. Some, not surprisingly at all, are just playing to the cameras because they want the cameras to be focused on them. And this is a way to do that, right? It's to stand out there and show who you are and what you stand for and reveal it to the American people. And of course, the press has been positioned and filming these people saying what it is they're saying. They don't have to do that. They could just say that, these people showed up outside the courtroom and, generally said whatever, but the cameras are trained on it so that we can all see it. And so cameras being trained on potentially members of Congress, some of them are showing up for the cameras. But there's more at stake here. There's more at play here. And these are the bigger things that strike me and that should worry us, should worry all of us. Number one, these are people who quite literally are demonstrating their loyalty to one person over, on the most basic level, doing their job, right? They're supposed to be in Washington doing their job. The fact that any order of business had to be temporarily postponed because key people are in New York standing outside a courthouse, that's a problem, right? That's a problem, not just in the normal course of business, but symbolically, these are people who are saying it is more important for us to stand here and, sort of help the violation of a gag order than it is for us to be doing our business for the sake of the public. We are here showing our loyalty to one person and what he represents, and that's what's taking priority right now, not the actual business of our jobs. Okay, so that's a problem. Now, I'll say right here, I'm not saying that being partisan is a problem, right? I'm not saying, and I'm also not saying, I rarely say unprecedented, unprecedented, it's a slip, unprecedented, I meant, wow, unprecedented. I rarely say that because almost everything that we're seeing, although it's shocking, and some of it truly is unprecedented, but most things we can find something in American history that at least echoes it. And so, we can't say these members of Congress are being shockingly partisan. We can't say even the Speaker of the House, who I will come back to, is being shockingly partisan, right? If you read my book, there's a whole section on the ways in which speakers of the House in the past have been blatantly partisan, have served their party, have been harsher on members of Congress from the opposition than to their own, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you can't say some of what we're seeing now is shocking because it's never happened before. It's the way it's happening, the nature of the way that it's happening, and the implications that is why I'm speaking to you, what I'm speaking about with you about this morning. So loyalty to one person over the job that they're supposed to be doing, highly problematic. The fact that what we're watching is a performance, right? So it's not even just politicians saying highly partisan things in a generally public way and then being held responsible for them. We're not really focused on accountability these days, apparently, but still, we're watching a performance, and it is very explicitly a performance for the public and the press, as well as for Donald Trump. So it's a little display of, what these people stand for and what they believe in, which is Donald Trump. It's a performative component. It literally is like a stage show that we're watching. It's not certainly not politics as normal, but it's not a simple statement of, I believe this is wrong. It's a performance. And as I hinted at a moment ago, and as I think it's important to note, when the Speaker of the House does this, leaves the House when he certainly has things to do down there, goes to New York, stands in front of this courthouse, and says things that are, touching on the things that Donald Trump himself is not supposed to say. And he says he's doing it for a friend. He's there. I think that was more than one of the people speaking in front of the courthouse said, well, I'm here to defend a friend. And on the one hand, you can see why they're claiming that it's personal and nice and warm sounding. But what they're also saying is, I'm here to support this powerful guy who I'm friends with. And my friendship with him, and I think he is more important than, fill in the blank about all the other things that are not being attended to, but I'm here for my friend. In my book, I write about how when I believe it was the member of Congress who shot and killed a waiter at the Willard Hotel, and he's brought to court for this. And different members of Congress showed up with him at court in a little posse. Here we are supporting this guy, this member of Congress who killed a waiter, because we're important and we're members of Congress and we are going to be here supporting him. And of course, everybody noticed. They didn't necessarily stand outside the courthouse and make statements, but their presence in a group made it really clear that the person being tried had power behind him, wasn't there on his own, that there were broader party implications to what was going on as far as if he were going to be punished harshly or not. There was a sort of umbrella of partisan support that descended and protected the person who was up for trial. It's a similar sort of thing. It's a display. It's a performance, partly for the court, but partly for the public as well. In 1856, not quite as big a public impact, more of a Washington impact, but still same kind of message. So generally speaking, that's what's happening here. But as I was about to say a moment ago, when the Speaker of the House does this, it says something, right? And this is part of generally what I think this moment is doing. Certainly not the first time in the recent past, or in American history, but particularly in the recent past, that we've seen a moment where there are people who are deliberately, in one way or another, undermining, naysaying, underplaying, in one way or another, swatting at our system of justice, our political system, national institutions, national political institutions. If you're standing outside that courtroom, and if you're the Speaker of the House standing outside that courtroom, and you're saying things like, this is a sham trial, he didn't do anything wrong, he's innocent, this shouldn't be happening, what you're saying is that, and Donald Trump deserves a fair trial. He does. He deserves a fair trial. What you're saying is, first of all, he's innocent. Well, we don't know that because that's what a trial is for, right? Like, the trial is supposed to be a fair trial in which people offer evidence and arguments are made, and then a jury deliberates, and then there's a decision made. If you're standing outside the courtroom saying, he's innocent, we all know he's innocent. Well, we don't, because you're getting in the way of an actual trial that's taking place, that is supposed to have two sides, witnesses, evidence, all of the things trials are supposed to have. So if you're standing there and saying this is corrupt, it shouldn't be happening, it's a sham, this man shouldn't be brought to court for this, you're generally helping to undermine, it's in one way or another, you're swatting at or slashing the criminal justice system, and saying, as so many people have said for so long, and certainly as Donald Trump himself has said for so long, that he is above the law, right? The law doesn't apply to him. He shouldn't have to be held responsible in a court of law for things that he allegedly did, right? This shouldn't be happening to him. So for anyone, any member of Congress to do this, that's swatting. I shouldn't say swatting, because that's actually a real thing, which is falsely calling in SWAT teams. Let's say slashing at our criminal justice system, at courts of law, really at the sort of the basics, the rule of law, sort of fundamental basis that underlies any sort of democratic nation, certainly the United States as a democratic nation, the thing that we all expect to have fair treatment under the rule of law. It doesn't always happen, but that's the goal, right? And we have people here saying that, well, no, certain people are above it. For the Speaker to do that, it's even weightier of a statement to be saying about what's going on right now. To say that, this is a sham trial, this whole thing shouldn't be happening. Basically, it's, well, because of our politics and what we think, there shouldn't be a trial. It's bad trial, bad judge, bad system. And certainly in all of the time that we've been doing History Matters, we've talked about many ways in which many institutions of government have been slashed at, undermined, just simple faith in our political system and in national institutions of all kind, constantly being damaged. This is another example of that, but it's so blatant in a sense, for people to be saying, as a trial is ongoing, there should be no trial, it's corrupt. There hasn't been a decision yet, right? You could say after the trial is done, I don't like the decision, but you would still be allowing for the fact that a court of law is having a trial, and that trials are what should be happening, and that, again, free, fair trials that are conducted in the way that they should be, with juries of peers and everything else that's supposed to happen in a trial, to say that shouldn't be happening for this individual because that's making some pretty dangerous and important allegations that are irresponsible. And they're irresponsible generally. They're irresponsible coming from members of Congress. They're really irresponsible coming from the Speaker of the House, who stands for the authority of the House of Representatives. All of this, we're so used to seeing by this point so many things that are so irregular and often so improper that we don't stop to notice. It's part of why some of the things I talk about here on Friday mornings, why I talk about them, this is one of them. It's like, oh, it's a bunch of politicians talking to the cameras, blah, blah, blah. No, they're denouncing and denying our system, the rule of law, our system, our legal system, our judicial system. They're saying it doesn't apply to this guy. That's big. And for people to be doing that in large quantities publicly, proudly, right? That's major in a way that I think it's worth pausing and thinking about, right? Is he innocent? Is he guilty? Well, that's what the trial should be for. Not, having people declare outside that it shouldn't be happening at all to President Trump. So he deserves a fair trial. He should be, and generally, I think, is getting a fair trial. So they're getting in the way of that, very deliberately getting in the way of that. Democracy, generally speaking, I'm going to speak in broad platitudes here, but I think it's important. We're at this time when faith in political structures, political institutions, the rule of law is being savaged, often deliberately. And when we see some people who want those systems, those structures, those guardrails to be swept aside or downplayed so that they can do what they want to get the kind of power that they want. Now, democracy, generally speaking, a democratic government, it's a pact. It is an agreement that a nation, the people of a nation, will abide by a shared system of government, that the people of the nation will have a voice in that government, that the government will be accountable to them. That doesn't mean that partisanship has no place in this system, right? We can wildly disagree on politics in a democracy. We're supposed to. Democracy is supposed to be a place where people can wildly disagree and argue and debate and then come up with some kind of a compromise or solution or non-solution. But the process of bringing together people with wildly different views and forcing them into an institution of government where they have to confront each other and there has to be a decision made, that's part of the democratic process. That's part of what's supposed to be happening, right? We're supposed to be allowing for, not even just tolerating, but we're supposed to be open to the fact that people will have very different views from us, and we may hate those views, but they have a right to have them. And we then argue and use systems of government and structures of government to make decisions. And we have elections, ideally free and fair elections, in which the American people get to decide what they like and don't like. And the outcome might be good, might be bad. But again, the people have a voice, and there are systems in place that represent a kind of pact that the American people, with the Constitution kind of as our signing document, we sign onto and agree, this is how we're going to run this nation. This is how a democratic politics works. When you are attacking the system as a whole, when you're attacking part of this shared pact that we have, and I would call the rule of law and the right to a free, fair trial as part of that basic pact, right? When you're openly violating that, when you're saying it doesn't apply or specifically doesn't apply to one person, you're chipping away at the shared pact that we share among us as Americans. This is what brings us together as Americans, is the things that we come together under, that we have agreed should govern us, right? The Constitution, the Bill of Rights. We can disagree about what they mean. We have for all of American history. That's fine. We're supposed to have arguments. We're supposed to debate. Things are in flux throughout time. There is never like one absolute standard, but the system itself and the procedures within it, they matter. So when you have people coming forward and they're not saying, I don't like the politics of this, I don't like that argument, I don't like what this person is saying, I disagree with what this person is saying, but what you're saying is the system itself is corrupt. The system itself shouldn't be applying to this person, this former president, at a moment when there's so much being eroded in just American faith in political institutions. That's highly irresponsible. And it is an attack in a very open kind of a way on democracy if you frame it that way, right? It's not, certainly not politics as normal, but to stand outside an ongoing trial and say it's a sham and the judge's daughter is corrupt and she's being paid off by Democrats. And I think there was an implication that were the jurors really Americans? I mean, there are all of these really low implications being made, and certainly a lot of things being said about Michael Cohen, and he's a liar, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, threatening or insulting witnesses. Not sure how wonderful that is either. But when all of this is going on in this way, and as tempting as it is to see it as just playing to the cameras, politics as normal, there is nothing about what we're seeing in front of that courthouse on the most basic level that is politics as normal. For members of Congress to come to New York in packs and say, first of all, what Donald Trump is not supposed to say. So they're saying they are acting, as he himself said, as surrogates. And then to basically say this is a sham trial, it shouldn't be happening, he shouldn't be put on trial, he's innocent, we all know he's innocent. And these aren't just general people saying this. These are government figures making these kinds of announcements before the American people, with the press swallowing up every syllable that they're uttering. This is really, really, really not politics as normal. And I suppose that's mostly why I bring it up this morning, because I think, particularly given now that it's happening every day, it's one of many instances in which it can be so easy to get swept into a mindset where it's like, oh, well, there they are being themselves again, right? There they are, these people and this group of people, and they act this way and they're doing it again, and we hate it and it's irritating and I wish they wouldn't do it. But it's bigger than that. Right? It's bigger than that, and its political implications. It's bigger than that, potentially in its impact. I don't know. But that's why I wanted to bring this up. The partisanship is to be expected. We've seen all kinds of things in American history where partisanship plays a role in, as I mentioned a moment ago, with the 1856 case in which a California congressman, Philemon Herbert, I believe was his name, shot and killed the waiter in the Willard Hotel, and members of Congress showed up to be like a cheering entourage for him. We've seen things like this before, but when a president himself is up for trial and people are saying there should be no trial for a former president of this sort, he's innocent, all of the implications of that in this particular moment, to say that they're highly irresponsible is an understatement. That's what I wanted to highlight today. Okay, I am 1 minute past. I'm moving my notes. I shall now, thank you, Carolee, mug. Okay, if there are people here who have not been here before, and I should say, if you have not been here before, or you're here for the first time, I should have said this at the beginning, say so in chat, and you will get a robust welcome from the wonderful History Matters community. I have probably used this mug before, but not very often. And you'll see, my wonderful little, mug cover does not cover this mug. Remind me, who is it? Beth? Who made my wonderful mug cover? One of you go at that. Elizabeth Sheedy made it. Thank you. And Elizabeth Sheedy said so. Thank you. I forget. I'm a historian because I'm bad with names and dates, and I really am. Okay, but this is wonderful. I use it every week. This is the mug. It's Shakespeare in performance. Your mic is off, Annie. We can't hear you.
That is huge, but I don't remember you using that one.
I might have used it once a long time ago. But
that's like a soup mug.
It is. I know it is, and I think it is. It's a mug with a title. I know. So the title is William Shakespeare, playwright and poet, and it lists, these are all specific actors and actresses playing specific roles. So, I thought this was, as ever, I ran to my cupboard and I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I was like, performances. Snatch. So for those of you who, exactly, Grand Theater, for those of you who have not been here before, every week I have a mug that touches on our theme. I do not have 216 mugs. I think Carolee just said it was the 216th episode. But I have many, and they're multi-useful. Someone just said, does it have Edwin Booth? It does not. There is no Booth in this. At any rate, that is my highly thematic mug.
Good mug.
Yes. Excellent.
All right, let's see what's going on in the Q&A. The chat was crazy busy. And then I think Claire's going to switch us to some sort of side-by-side something or other. I don't know. I still see a bunch of boxes, but I think she'll do whatever it is that the people ask for. So it's not like a tennis match.
Do what the people ask for.
Give the people what they want. Okay.
Yeah.
Ellen, who I believe is in Houston, they're having some scary weather. So she has a question here. We're going to answer it. But also, Ellen, please stay safe.
Oh, no.
Ellen says, probably a question for the after party, but did Joanne say she wants to ask about the commencement address from the football players. Should we save that for the after party?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sydney is back, our favorite undergrad. Sydney says, this is a loaded question, but why is Trump different in the sense that his criminal charges most likely won't sway people from voting from him, whereas other candidates would immediately be put out of favor with people doing the same thing? She's trying to figure out how he gets away with that.
Right. Well, I'll speak generally enough to say, well, right, there's Dave Gold. I will say that part of his appeal to those who he appeals to and who approve of him is his persona that he's above the law. He's a tough guy. He does things and doesn't get caught for them. He's kind of a superpower that way. He has swagger, he's a guy that the rules don't apply to, and we want that person to be fighting for us. I think for some people that's part of his appeal. And so sadly, when he does things that are wrong and he doesn't get held responsible for them, for some people, I think that's appealing. That's a real problem. But I think for some people, there's appeal to that. Like, look at him. Like, he's really showing the system that we're angry at, of what it stands for, right? He's going to stand up for us and do whatever it is that he has to do. And he's not going to be bound by pesky things like government structures and the rule of law. For some people, I think that there's an appeal to that. And that's a big bind. That's a big problem. And the logic of finding your way out of that, we can save for another day. I don't know what that is, but I think that's part of the answer to that question. And yes, Amy Edge says, read Strongman by Ruth Ben Guyot. I would say yes. That would be a fine thing to read to understand the appeal of this kind of person.
And I'm sure Tim will have a link to that any moment. Troy asks about Nikki Haley still polling double-digit support, even though she's no longer in the race. So I guess she was already on the ballot in certain places for these primaries, and she's still getting votes even after she dropped out of the race. So he's asking, like, what's broken within the polling with Trump being as close to Biden as he is? How is there a way to explain how people that aren't even in the race are still getting?
Well, I mean,
double digits is pretty good.
Right. For me to continue to say, like, this is not politics as normal. This is less abnormal than many other things we talk about. In this case, I just think it's, I've said more than once that I think the Republican Party is dead, and what we have now is the MAGA Party. But there are people who are going to not want to vote for Biden, who probably consider themselves Republicans, but don't want to vote for Trump, and they're going to find somebody else to vote for. And they have, right? So one might say, and I'm sure there are other arguments, right now, what comes to mind for me is these are people who don't want to vote for Trump, but want to vote on the Republican side. So it's an anti-Trump vote of a sort. It's an anti-Trump, but I'm not going to vote with the Democrats for Biden vote. I think that's what it is. And so, for some people, maybe they mean it as a statement. For some people, maybe they sincerely mean it. They would just rather have her. Maybe there are some people who are doing that because they really like her to be vice president. I have no idea. But in one way or another, it represents people making a statement. And again, clearly, because this person is no longer running, rather than people saying, I vote for this candidate. Some are probably saying I would prefer, but more than anything, I think it's people who feel limited in what they can vote for and don't want to vote for Trump, but don't want to vote for Biden and don't want to vote Democratic at all. And that's a preference. I'm sure there are other ways to explain this that political commentators have come up with, but it feels to me like a Republican anti-Trump vote.
All right. Our good buddy Dave asks, have the politicians who showed up at the New York City trial to denounce the rule of law failed, or is the problem the free press, who apparently have no idea how to report on this and other norms that the press has violated?
Well, I don't think that's an either or, but I do think, and I've said this somewhere on some social media platform, it would be very possible for the press to say, these members of Congress showed up outside the courthouse and continued making statements about whatever without having cameras trained on them to broadcast to everyone that performance every day. You could report on it. You could say that it's happening without making it a platform for people to use in the way that they're using it. So I won't, point to the press and say this is all their fault, but I do think there are ways in which the press is operating on autopilot, politics as normal, even now. And this is happening, and it's news, and we'll cover it. There are different ways to cover news. There are different ways to inform the public. And I think some press authorities need to think about the words they're using, the headlines they're writing, the things they choose to cover with cameras versus with stories, or if they're going to cover it with a camera, you don't have to broadcast every word these people say, right? You can, so there are any number of ways to cover this, to get the news out to people without helping the people making this performance to say what they're saying that is dangerous, just blindly sort of broadcasting that all over the place. I think, I still think that there's a lot of autopilot. This is how we cover politics, even now, when we're so far from normal politics in so many ways. And, again, I don't want to be the person who says, the evil press, because the press is doing a really, really important and difficult job. But I think that there are some members of the press that need to really think carefully about how they're doing their job.
Okay, Linda asks, what do you think about the story in the New York Times about the upside down flag at Alito's house?
So I thought about that this morning, and I have not read everything about it. And so I'm actually, so I had a moment where I was like, how could I not talk about that? But I think for now, I'm not going to talk about it because I don't know the full story. I saw the pictures. I know Rachel Maddow talked about it. I know it's in the New York Times, so it's not like some fly-by-night accusation. I would rather read more and inform myself more before being outraged. Actually, this is an example of what I say many, many weeks, right? If you're about to be hyper outraged by something, pause for a moment and get the details and get the facts and consider. I want to be really outraged. Like I really do. And that was my immediate response was, what the bleep? But before I vent that for many people here, I'm going to read more and then perhaps vent my outrage, but I won't do that yet.
Okay, well, we'll save that. That might be a topic in a coming.
That very well could be a topic. Yeah.
All right. So Linda, we're going to table that one. Miranda Bailey Peets, who I don't know if you were already logged on, Joanne. Miranda's here in Virginia, and I'm going to see her this afternoon, finally, after all these years. I know, Miranda's
excellent.
I'm so excited. So we'll send you pictures. It says, do actions like Taylor Swift trademarking the phrase female rage, the musical, showing a direct response of the circus surrounding Donald J. Trump in the media right now? I didn't see that.
I didn't see that either. So the question is,
she's apparently trademarked the phrase female rage, the musical. Maybe that's just her next album title, y'all. But she wanted to know if you thought that might be a direct response of the circus, that this is the media with Trump's trial.
Well, it could be, right? So if you're going to put on a spectacle, people are going to respond, and people who have the power of spectacle behind them, and certainly Taylor Swift is that person, she could be a person who could have that kind of an impact whenever. I hadn't heard that, so maybe it's not enough of a spectacle yet. I'm also not a person who like absolutely is glommed onto Taylor Swift, but I think when you are bluntly, boldly, aggressively, and even offensively partisan in what you're saying, you invite other people to do that in opposition to you. I think the gendered component of this, I think women speaking up on any number of issues and saying we're speaking up, and we're women speaking up who often were not being highlighted as the people speaking up, that's good too. So that part of the message I'm thumbs up for as well. But I actually hadn't heard that. But the general idea that if you are putting on a spectacle and making an extreme point, that you're going to invite other people on the other side to put on a spectacle and have an extreme point. Yes. Yes. That was a very logical outcome. And again, if you're thinking strategically, which you should be in the press, you should be if they're the spectacle maker, then you're going to be thinking about implications of what you're doing. If you're thinking strategically and responsibly, then you're also going to be thinking about the negative implications of what you're doing. Responsible is good. Responsible is important. We're not seeing necessarily as much responsible as we should be seeing these days when people are thinking about political gestures and performances.
I'm also wondering if she didn't trademark that after the NFL player gave the commencement address. To me, made a lot of women angry. I don't know.
Oh yeah, and we can yeah that. Well, there was a case in which I just felt outrage.
Yeah.
Because there's no way to take it differently than the way it was. Yeah, I'm not going to go there, but yes.
Nope.
Jessica says, if we lost civility, is it more okay in general to not use manners and general respect for other humans? I think, I hate to say, I don't normally frame it, have we lost civility? Because I think that's a long-standing, I think people in so many times have been like, where are our manners? But someone asked me this yesterday, why is it that people feel so free to behave in this way? I think there are lots of reasons, but when you live in an age when, and I said this yesterday too, I don't want to keep pointing at social media and saying it's evil, but I think when there are platforms in which you can be anonymous and say horrible things about people and be powerful in saying them, that's not helpful. That encourages people to have that kind of behavior and speech in their vocabulary. It normalizes it to a certain degree. I don't think that's social media is why we treat each other the way we're treating each other these days, but it certainly fosters it, encourages it. I think that would be a really interesting, that's actually another idea for an episode, right? Well, so why are we acting the way we're acting? I was about to say, a student, I'm always thinking of paper ideas, but that might also be an interesting, again, wouldn't have absolute answers, but a really interesting thing to discuss during an episode.
Well, Sydney might be able to write a paper. Write that down, Sydney, for next semester. But also I was thinking when I was a kid, my mom told me that when my older brothers and sisters, there's a pretty big gap, that they used to have these notebooks called slam books where they would write the names of all the kids in the class at the top of a page, and then they would pass it around and kids would say mean things about them.
That's horrible.
It's horrible. And she said it was called a slam book. And because we had a kid in the neighborhood who was kind of awkward, and he passed his yearbook around the bus and asked everybody to sign it on the last day of school, and people wrote mean things. And then he was really upset, and his mother was upset. So she called my mom, because my mom was like the therapist for the whole neighborhood. And I just think Facebook has sort of become like a digital slam book.
Wow.
You don't know who wrote it on there unless you do. Like, we actually used to do like handwriting analysis.
Oh,
that kid's yearbook, and we were like, I know that person makes their E's that way. And then some of us went and were like, why'd you write that mean thing in so-and-so's yearbook? He's like, well, everybody was doing it. Well, that doesn't make it right.
Right. That's
I never forgot that day. That poor little kid, he just
Aw.
wanted people to sign his yearbook because he didn't have very many friends. And that's what Facebook.
Horrible.
Yeah.
I also want to respond here. Cece says she asked a friend in Kentucky about Let's Go Brandon and worse. And he said there's a cult that wants to not have to be civil. I think that relates back to what I said about former President Trump, right? Is that not feeling that you don't have to be civil, feeling that you can do whatever you want to do, is kind of a political statement now. It's not only on the right, but I think there are some people that really appeals to. that idea that, we're bigger than this. We don't have to follow these normal rules. It's not a good look, and it does not imply good things are going to happen, but I think it's the same kind of emotional dynamic involved, I would say. Oh, wait. And Robert, I don't mean to interrupt you. Robert says, has mankind ever not behaved this way? No, people are always like rude, obnoxious, nasty, attack each other. What's different is the logic and the framing and the technology and the implications. Right. So no, you're correct. It's not as though there was a golden time. I saw the place kicker go zooming by in chat, and someone saying he's talking about the 1950s like it's a magical time, right? There are not magical moments like that. People talk about the founding that way too, right? Like, well, back in the founding era when everyone was civilized, and yeah, I know for a fact how not really civilized it was. I write about violence, but still, people always want there to be a golden period that we can go back to. There are no golden periods. There just aren't. And, that's a great example of one. You might like some things about the 1950s, but let's be big and real and talk about what actually was going on then. And it's not going to look so golden. So that in and of itself is already highly suspect. If someone says, back in the wonderful days when, it's like, okay, well, maybe you like one thing that happened then, but let's be actually contextual. What was that period really about anyway? And then that's probably going to evaporate as a form of logic.
Right. Susan asks, could we look at the Republicans at Trump's trial as a political event that might remind us of the incredibly powerful propaganda tools of the past?
Well, it is a political event now. The former president wanted it to be one and wanted to campaign with it, and then the gag rule got in the way of him campaigning. So these people are also partly campaigning for Trump by doing this. So, it is a political event. What was the second half of that statement? Oh, propaganda.
Yeah.
We should, I don't know if I'm now at the point where we're thinking about topics that I have to go back and discover if I've talked about something already. I don't know if I've talked about propaganda. I would be surprised if I haven't talked about what it is and what it does, but if I haven't, that might be number one on the list of, I'm coming up with great topics. Normally on Thursdays, I'm like, what are we going to talk about? But the question of propaganda, the emotional power of propaganda, because again, that's part of what it's supposed to be doing, is encouraging you to believe a certain way by taking advantage of human dynamics and emotion and assumptions and all of the things that bypass reason and actual logical thinking. Does this have echoes of that? Sure, it does. There we go. Clinton says, I finally got around to reading Jason Stanley's How Propaganda Works. Yeah, that might be a good topic. If I have addressed it, I'm sure it must be long ago enough that I should do it again. But that's actually a really good idea. What is intentional propaganda that's meant to act that way, or things that end up acting as propaganda because they're deployed that way. That actually would be a really interesting thing for us to discuss.
Yeah. And Lawrence brings up Happy Days, the show Happy Days of the nostalgia. Yeah.
Well, that's right. So that kind of nostalgia, although in that case it's entertainment, but still. Yes, that I might have talked about it, but an update would be a good idea. No, so nostalgia for the perfect past is like, that's also an ongoing human thing, but it's one thing to have kind of a cultural nostalgia, and another thing to say we should go back to the good old days when women had babies and not thoughts. I'm just going to stop myself right there. Yeah.
That's for the after party.
That's for the after
party. Rage the musical, the preview. All right. Kevin Brady asks, I think the biggest story coming out of the Trump trial was Cohen's directing the reporters to write stories and cover Trump positively. Will we ever be able to trust newspapers again? It says Maggie Haberman and Katie Tur were given special access for writing negative stories about Biden. Yeah, those.
Yeah, but well, although there is a case in which it's worth noting, it's not as though insider access and fake news stories are new, right? So what that is bad, and that it should be exposed, and we should think about it and get the details of it and talk about it. There is a case in which it's not as though it's the first time that some reporter was given insider access to some politician and explicitly told, make this look good, right? That happens. That has happened. It's not good. And it's, really not good if you're a president allegedly committing crimes and then wanting good coverage of things. That's a big problem, and we need to know about it. But there's a case in which it's certainly not the first time in which that sort of thing has happened. But it's the sort of thing, however often it does or doesn't happen, we, the people, deserve to know about it and talk about it. It needs to be exposed. Will we ever be able to trust the press? Well, we should always be questioning the press, right? I don't think necessarily that the press is less trustworthy now. I just think it to me, does not seem to be confronting this potentially authoritarian moment really well. I think there's a politics as normal bias. I think there's a let's cover both sides bias that in other times works, and that in this time is really complicated. And again, I don't want to blame everything on the press, because that doesn't make any sense. But I think responsible press coverage, thoughtful press coverage, at a time when implications are considered and when people realize how much words matter, that's really important to the here and now.
All right. We have an anonymous question in the Q&A. I usually don't let people put them in there anonymously. I asked a couple of times. I don't know who Bubba Buddha is. The question seems legit, so I'm gonna risk here.
Question.
Is the nature of MAGA politicians so different today, or are they being permitted to be more like themselves by the public? In other words, what's up with the large number of citizens so seduced by Trump who's not willing to work with the current system? Is Trump so appealing at this point in history? Even though he's like bucking the system, I think.
Well, I think that I think in some ways, MAGA republicanism is about bucking the system, right? It's about getting what you want and doing what you want, regardless of the system. That's part of the appeal of it. I've been working on this paper for a very long time, and I'm not done yet. But one of the things it says, in general, is that if you truly believe that you are entitled to power, that you should always have power, that you should always be in power, that you are owed power without a doubt, then democracy feels like victimization. Then democracy is victimization, and then you're going to strike out at democracy. I think that's a very simple fact of dynamics. If you truly feel that you should have power forever, democratic politics, which are based on contests and votes and public opinion, that's going to be victimization to you, because it threatens for you to not have power. And so some of what we're seeing now is bound up with that dynamic, that democracy feels like victimization because it potentially deprives you of power and you feel like you should have it forever.
Yeah, and Robert says this is what came growing out of the Tea Party. All right, we have done all the questions. Oh, we just had one pop in. Look at that. Okay,
take us up right to the line. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, here's our last question of the morning, folks. Dave asks, seems like the primary system that replaced backroom deals to pick presidential candidates has become a real problem. Sanders versus Clinton and Trump's winner-take-all states versus 15 candidates. Should the parties go back to backroom deals? Oh gosh, I hope not.
I mean, it's hard for me to say yeah, because we deserve to know what we can know, so backroom deals. Well, and what's interesting about this, you go all the way back, go to like 1800, 1801, and you had people, this is, I think, particularly in New York, when people maybe not 1801, but right around there, people were beginning to understand that conventions and things were popular because people wanted to feel that they could come into a room and vote and come up with candidates or endorse candidates together. And there's, I believe, again, somewhere early 19th century in New York, an instance where, and I think they were Jeffersonian Republicans, wanted to have some convention that would look open enough, people could take part, they would vote, candidates would be picked, but in reality, behind closed doors, the insiders picked the candidates they wanted. Then they had this little convention thing and people voted, and then they left the room and came back and said, a winner, winners have been chosen. And it was just the slate of people they'd already decided before they had the convention. So, there's always been a sort of, on the one hand, understanding that even if you're just doing it for purposes of propaganda and to please the public deserves to know things, and people want to decide things on their own behind closed doors and have power. And I think that's a bind of, or a challenge to, an ongoing challenge to democracy.
Yeah. This is the anniversary, I think, of Brown versus Board. And it kind of reminds me, they're talking in the chat about, the people where the rules don't apply to them. And I think about all the schools here in Virginia that were shut down for 5 years. 5 years, kids didn't get an education so that somebody's kids didn't have to go to school with somebody else's kids. Even though the Supreme Court said, nope, they got to go to school together, didn't apply to them. So they just built their own schools, and everybody else, just interesting.
Lawrence says that there's something contradictory here, that on the one hand, the victims trying to rebel against the established system, on the other hand, willing to create a new authoritarian regime. Well, yeah, they want it to be their own system. They are the ones that want to have the power, right? So a democratic system that is grounded on contests where we don't know who's going to have power, that's a bad system, according to people who, again, are authoritarian. So yeah, they're going to feel like victims because democracy means they can't always have power, right? Which I meant what I said, right? If you truly believe you are always supposed to have power and no one else should, just you and yours, then yeah, democracy becomes, in your mind, victimization. So to me, I might be missing the point here, but I don't think that's contradictory. I think that has to do with the nature of the regime being put in place. Okay. And I did want to.
You had a question pop in. I don't know if you want to try one more.
I'll try one more question, but before we do it, I will say one other thing, because I see that Jim says first American political conventions. I wrote an article a million zillion years ago for the Yale Law Review about I think conventions and the election of 1800 or something, and I believe it's in that article where I talk about the instance that I just talked about with fake results from a convention and prearranged. I think that's where it is if people are interested in finding it. I haven't looked at it in a really long time, but I think that's where I wrote about it. Okay, last question.
Okay, Sue asks, countdown from the Keith Olbermann addresses the reporters mentioned in yesterday's cross-examination. It says, no, Cohen did not, it says in quotes, did not testify he used Maggie, New York Times, Chris Cuomo, and Katie Tur to get Trump good coverage. Much as it pains me to say, I have to defend them. Katie Tur used to live with him. He's waiting to see the transcript. So I don't know.
Well, what I did see was some people saying, questioning the meaning of that. Like, was it actually saying, I give you access, and you say good things? And there were some people questioning that, particularly with Maggie Haberman. And I don't know enough about that to weigh in one way or another. I will just say it is worth saying that I did not see sort of an absolute conclusion that, oh, she sold herself into the system, that there were others saying maybe that's not the logic of it. And I don't know enough to weigh in, but it's worth noting that people should go and do research and figure out the meaning of this. We deserve to know things like that. But in this case, the thing that we deserve to know about, I don't absolutely want to land on a square and say this is what it means, because my impression from yesterday poking around and reading about it is that some people are surprised, like simplifying it in a way that maybe it shouldn't be simplified, but I don't know.
All right, I think we cleared the deck.
We cleared the deck. It is only 3 minutes after we did it. Okay. So I know this is great. Look at us. Here's what's going to happen now. Carolee is prompting me. So right now we're going to go to the after party. What that means is that we will no longer be recording our conversation so that we can be even freer and easier in what we're saying, as though we're so stiff and formal during our normal ongoing, right? Not, but still. In the after party, we could talk about whatever we want to talk about. If you beamed in through NCHE, you just stay right where you are and poof, you will be in the after party. If you are watching us from Facebook, you need to leave Facebook and go to ncheteach.org/conversations. That's ncheteach.org/conversations. And then you too, poof, will be in the after party. As ever, I want to thank all of you for coming here and being here week after week. It matters a lot. And even just my saying in today's episode several times, the public deserves to know. They do. And we are the public, discussing these things, figuring out what they mean. And anyone who goes from this on to talk about this with other people, you're doing your job politically. You're saying, here's an issue that came up that I have questions about. We talked about it. What do you think? Right? Democracy, different opinions, people informing each other, asking questions, disagreeing, and being able to do that in a space where they don't jump on each other's face for doing so. So being here matters. It's part of the democratic process. I appreciate your being here. I want to thank Annie and Sam the Avocado and Jessica and John. Claire, I have to say Claire, even though I only want to say Sam the Avocado. I so appreciate you guys for being here and making this possible, and doing the work of democracy along with everyone who comes here every week to talk about it. So have a wonderful week, everybody. I will see you in a week. Who the heck knows what we'll talk about next week? Maybe propaganda, actually. Might be, I might already have a topic, which would be shocking. It hardly ever happens that easily. But at any rate, thank you guys for being here. And let us segue to the after party.